The Chief Whip, Andrew Mitchell, whose job it is to discipline government backbench MPs, has apologised for an angry outburst at police officers on Downing Street. The cabinet member says he did not treat the police with the respect they deserve, but he denies using the language quoted in the Sun newspaper today. The paper alleges he swore at them and described them as plebs, using four-letter expletives, because they wouldn't let him cycle out of Downing Street on Wednesday. The incident has brought an angry reaction from the Police Federation of England and Wales. Their chairman, Paul McKeever, has dismissed Mr Mitchell's apology as half-hearted and says it's hard to fathom how someone who holds the police in such contempt could be allowed to hold a public office. Well, Mike Pannett is an author and former Metropolitan Police officer. Good afternoon to you, Mike.
Good afternoon, Sheila.
And Andrew Pearce joins us, a columnist for the Daily Mail and regular with us at Prime Minister's Questions. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Sheila.
Now, Mike, you stood on duty outside Downing Street many times and seen ministers, including prime ministers, coming and going. Did you ever see anything on this level of disrespect?
Absolutely not. I think, I was down there prior to those police, the big barriers being installed, when there was just a police officer or two who stood at the sort of top of the street and one who stood outside number 10. And, on the odd occasion I was there, never once. You always were treated with the utmost respect, even if it was just the nod of the head. And, of course, it's quite obvious for what happened in 1991 with the terrorist threat on number 10. The gates were installed. So, of course, the security is paramount now for number 10, and the opening of those gates is not done on a regular basis, obviously if cars are coming in at different times, but they're there for a reason, and that's to protect number 10. So I've found it quite shocking what Andrew Mitchell has had to say.
Well, in his statement, he said, and I've got it in front of me, he says that he attempted to leave Downing Street via the main gate, something he's been allowed to do many times before, but on this occasion wasn't. Would that have been typical in your time? If the gate was open, through you go, Mr Government Minister.
Not really, no. I mean, like I said, it's usually for vehicular access and for people coming in and going to number 10. But I think what's made Andrew Mitchell's potentially got a bit of a shovel out here, because he's sort of said, well, on one hand, I've had this altercation with the police, and obviously now there's a dispute about what was actually said. And I think, he's based of all his sort of abused the police officers there, but to make matters a little bit worse, Sheila, it looks like he's now calling them liars as well. So I think what needs to happen is the Prime Minister needs to get a grip of the Chief Whip, whose job actually it is to keep ministers in line. And I'm afraid, if the pressure's getting to him and he can't control himself, and as a former shadow police minister as well, he should know better than this. It's no excuse. Well,
he's refuting, before we start talking about him calling people liars, he's saying that what the Sun is reporting isn't what he said. We don't know where the Sun got its comments from. It might not have been directly from those police officers at all.
That's right.
We know, if anything, from events a week ago that the Sun has form. Andrew on this, Andrew Pearce, whatever the whys and wherefores, it looks terribly bad, doesn't it? David Cameron knows it. He's accepted an apology. He says, most importantly, the police officer in question has had an apology from Andrew Mitchell. But this is the man who's meant to keep ministers in line.
It's a disaster for him, actually, because his job is to enforce discipline within the parliamentary party. That's his job as a cabinet minister, newly promoted to the job of Chief Whip. And if the Chief Whip of the Conservative Party, the Chief Whip of the government, doesn't understand about accepting and following the rule of law, you do wonder. It is appalling. It's not just that he's a former shadow minister. I don't even think, actually, Sheila, it's so much whether he did or didn't use swear words. But using words like plebs is really appalling. And particularly in this week of all weeks, in which two young women police officers were shot dead senselessly as they were going about their job. These police officers are armed. They're there to protect people like Andrew Mitchell and the Prime Minister. Andrew Mitchell's office is in 10 Downing Street. They're there to protect them. It's not a particularly glamorous or interesting job, and he should respect those police officers, not treat them like they're his public school fags. That's the danger for him. He did go to rugby school. He's nicknamed Thrasher. That was his nickname at school, and it tends to reinforce this notion that David Cameron's cabinet is dominated by public school toffs who don't have any real grasp of the ordinary world in which the rest of us live.
Andrew, does this add to his difficulties? This has just come in. The leader of the Metropolitan Police Federation, John Tully, has called for Andrew Mitchell to resign after those comments to a police officer in Downing Street. Mr. Tully said Mr. Mitchell's remarks were outrageous, and he told the BBC, if this was one of my members speaking to a member of the government, they'd be on the carpet now and would be gone within days.
It does add to his difficulties. What will probably save Mitchell is the fact there is no recording of what he said. If somebody had managed to use their mobile phone or some device and caught his words, and if indeed he had used words like plebs and swore at the police officer, I think he'd be gone already. So he might yet. I think he'll probably survive this. But Cameron can't afford to lose a chief whip 2 weeks after the reshuffle. It's a very important.
Can I just say to Mike? I mean, as a police officer, I'll bet you've been on the receiving end. I've done this myself. And if you, I don't know, I can't think of concrete examples, but those moments when someone with some apparent authority over you in a situation really gets on your nerves because you want to do something. I've rolled my eyes. I've said, "Oh, for goodness sake," and go. I mean, if that's all it was, well, yes, it's a bit disrespectful perhaps, but it isn't necessarily the kind of carpeting that's been reported by
Sheila,
The Sun, is it?
This is what I was saying. The police officers at that gate will have obviously, they'll have heard what has been said to them by Andrew Mitchell, and they've obviously gone to their supervisor and pointed it out. If it had been a roll of the eyes and a sort of, somebody who's had a bad day, let's say, then I think police officers are used to that sort of behaviour, but certainly not from members of the government. And I was on television not too many moons ago talking about a case where is it okay to swear at police officers? And I quite came down, on a Friday and a Saturday evening with people who've perhaps had too much to drink, then that's the sort of behaviour that police officers are quite used to, and to some extent they've got to have a lot of discretion. But this is in somebody who should know better. And as the chap from the Daily Mail's just said there, his job as chief whip is to keep discipline within his party. Now that quite clearly is not the case, and I think I know John Tully well. He doesn't come out with statements without giving it some thought. And of course, the Chief Federation Chairman, Paul McKeever, has summed it up very well indeed. And it just appears to me that at the moment, certain members of the government are holding the police in absolute contempt. And this is this is not a good day for Andrew Mitchell, and it's not a good day whatsoever for the coalition party. And politically, Andrew, you've made the point already that in this week of all weeks, to be denigrating a police officer in the street is not good. It's not good. It's not good any day of the week, but
it's not good any day, Sheila. But it is frankly incomprehensible that he would speak like that to two police officers who have been as distressed as many of their colleagues at what happened to those two women in Greater Manchester.
Let's just have a quick listen to what David Cameron has said on this.
What Andrew Mitchell said and what he did was not appropriate. It was wrong, and it's right that he's apologised. He's obviously apologised to me, but much more importantly, he's apologised thoroughly to the police, and that needs to be done. The police do an outstanding job across our country. They do a very important job protecting places like Number 10 Downing Street, and I'm very conscious of the protection they give to me and my family and the work that they do for everyone in public life, and I'm eternally grateful for that. And the police should always have our respect and our help and support, and that's very, very important.
He'll want this put to bed, won't he, Andrew?
He wants it to go away very quickly. As I say, if a tape emerges, then I think Andrew Mitchell's in real trouble, but he'll hope that this can just die down and be all gone away. If the Metropolitan Police Commissioner himself was to intervene, that would really, really make Mitchell's career as Chief Whip probably the shortest ever.
And it does show again, doesn't it, that no matter what is going on around us, those little personal indiscretions and errors and poor judgments matter increasingly in politics, don't they?
They do, and again, the antics of Mitchell reinforce the view of the great British public that politicians are completely occupying a different world altogether.
I think the other thing as well, which is absolutely right and proper for me to just point out here, is if potentially I was a police officer, when I was a police officer, and I'd been with a colleague, and I've stood behind John Major when he was first elected into the Conservative Party. Now, if I'd have said something abusive to John Major or any politician who would be visiting Number 10, then I can tell you now, it wouldn't be a question of me as a police officer ringing up to say, oh, I've had a bad day, I'm really sorry. It would be a question of you would be on severe discipline, and potentially, if you spoke out like that to a politician, the chances are you would be sacked.
Well, actually, Mike, you're echoing exactly what Paul McKeever, the chairman of the Police Federation of England and Wales, has said in a statement, and we can talk to him now. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
I mean, this is essentially what you've said, isn't it?
Well, the comments are, to say the least, unfortunate during this week. We accept the fact that Andrew Mitchell has apologised, and we accept that. And I've also spoken to Damien Green, the police minister, and certainly doesn't reflect his view of the police service, having spoken to him just a short while ago. And he too would like to express to me his apologies about what happened. But it does unfortunately seem to reflect a view of policing within a very few amongst at the top of government, and that is disturbing for police officers when this sort of feeling is leaked out, if you like, to ordinary officers. How
does it reflect on other people? How can you extrapolate from what Andrew Mitchell has done that there is a view at the top of government that is disrespectful to police?
Well, it's difficult to do because obviously conversations will go on behind closed doors, but there's a suspicion there, certainly for some time, that the views of police officers are given a very low opinion, or they have a very low opinion of police officers' views, and they pressed on with the reform agenda without listening to the pragmatic position that we try to put as the Police Federation and others within the policing world. So it's been very frustrating for a lot of officers across the country, and when events like this happen, perhaps it gives an idea of what the mindset might be like from some at the very heart of government who are dictating the policy. We know it doesn't reflect the views of everybody in government. It doesn't reflect the views of all MPs either. That would be a nonsense to say that. But it gives a suggestion, and it gives an indication of what might be going on in relation to what we're experiencing. This is a very, very difficult time for police officers, and for this to come out at this time is unfortunate, to say the least.
And Andrew Pearce, you know that the sort of central disagreement politically about the police is there will be some politicians who think it is just another job, it is just another public service, and others who say no, it is the ultimate public service because people are putting their lives on the line, and we've seen that very clearly this week.
Absolutely, and of course the Conservative government, which traditionally one would think would be on the side of the police, is in a very bad place with them because of the number of job cuts, and the former police minister, Nick Herbert, saying that the number of police officers isn't relevant. They keep arguing they were going to move them out of pen pushing and get more bobbies on the beat, but relations, I have to say, between the police and the government are at an all-time low, and this incident is going to make matters far worse, and rightly so.
Sheila, I think it's an interesting point, and I think that's just been raised about Nick Herbert. Now, what's absolutely vital now going forward is that there's been call from this government to bring the police in from the cold, and I think it's quite right, and I would surmise that I would imagine this is the contempt that our former policing minister held the police. I believe, and Paul McKeever, who's there now, might be able to tell me, did he ever sit down ever and consult with the Federation, who represent over 100,000 frontline police officers in this country?
Paul McKeever?
Well, yes, Nick Herbert did, but Nick Herbert is no longer the police minister. He is out of office now. We have a new police minister there, Damien Green. We have to engage with government, and Damien Green has made some very positive statements since he came into office just a few days ago. Good. And we have to listen to him and hope that he means what he says, and that he will be listening to us and engaging, because we are the practical voice of policing. And if government doesn't listen to those who are actually the practitioners, then we could end up with some very awful consequences, or unintended consequences, for the communities we serve. We don't want that. Nobody in government, I'm sure, wants that as well. We are a voice that can assist. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case too much up until now, in terms of government forming policy. We hope that we do see a sea change. We are willing to work with any government.
OK, thank you to all three of you. Paul McKeever, Chairman of the Police Federation of England and Wales, and thanks to Mike Pannett, an author and former Metropolitan Police officer who worked at Downing Street, and to Andrew Pearce, columnist for the Daily Mail. You're listening to 5 Live. It's 1:24. Let's get some travel news now from Orna Merchant.
Thank you, Sheila.